Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me. Tonight's guest is Robbie Fulks, reporting from Los Angeles, California. I'm so excited to have him here. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know, comment below where you're watching from. And if you've seen Robbie perform live, let us know where. Let us know where you first heard of his music. Talks amongst yourselves. But without further ado, welcome Robbie Fulks to Talk to Me. It's good to have you.
Good to be here.
I'm pretty psyched to have you, man. I've gotten the fortunate honor to have you over the years and play on my little stages up here in the Bay Area, and we even have one scheduled for September, and maybe it'll happen. We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll have to see. Yeah. Well, I was kind of late to the Robbie Folks game. I've been hearing your name for years. A lot of fans over the years, when I got involved with promoting concerts 10 years ago, were constantly asking me to have Robbie Folks, and you always played the Freight and Salvage, and I don't know if you played that many other places outside of there in the Bay Area, but I do recall the first time I got to see you in person, and I was so psyched. It was at Folk Alliance in 2017, I think. And I remember when I told you I saw you at Folk Alliance, you were like, "Oh, good. I'm glad that this expensive thing got me a gig."
Those are the exact words that just went through my brain again. I mean, I guess I forgot this whole conversation, but that was in Kansas City.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You were with Shad Cobb, and
Yeah.
I was sitting like on a hotel bed, and you're right there, and it was just a really fun way to see you for the first time. Because you guys project and you have such a big sound for the two of you, and I was blown away and a fan instantly. It was probably like in the Bloodshot Room or something like that. But since then you've played the Cookout series for me. We've done the Art and Wine Festival. We had one year where we did like 3 gigs in one year. We did the house show in Piedmont, and
Wow.
then that really fun co-bill we did with you and John Doe last year.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm really happy I was at that Folk Alliance.
Yeah, me too. That's probably one of 3 gigs that I've gotten out of that focal arms thing. I mean, the experience of it, people won't know what we're talking about, but this group puts on an event in a hotel. What was the name of the hotel in Kansas City?
It's
Sheraton or
the
Marriott?
Westin.
Weston. So, and it's hard to describe, but they take over about what 8 or 9 floors, and they turn it into sort of a college dorm room atmosphere, postering all over, people crowding the halls, and as you say, concerts, little mini concerts in tiny motel rooms where 20 or 30 people will press in, and the point is to what again? To get gigs, I guess.
Get gigs and network. It's
Yeah,
a lot of fun. I mean, for me and maybe for you and some other artists, you also get to see all your other fellow working folks in the industry all at once, which is a rare occurrence. You get to actually have a beer with some of your fellow musician friends.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Folk Alliance, that would be it's like a cruise ship in a hotel. That doesn't sound like a it wouldn't that would I was at the one in New Orleans, and I'm like, uh-oh. Like, because everyone in New Orleans had a lot of they're the first hit kind of hard.
Yeah, that was just this last February, wasn't it?
Yeah, January, February, yeah.
Yeah, I
But
was down there gigging at the time, and I remember a couple of people kind of walking over to where I was gigging from the Folk Alliance. We were in the Hi Ho Lounge, all the rooms down there have goofy names, and but yeah, in retrospect, that was the maybe the end of an era for now, and the Folk Alliance is canceled, as I understand, for
yeah,
next year.
yeah, I just now remember that's right because I saw your poster for the Hi-Ho Lounge while I was down there and shot you a text. I'm like, oh, the marketing's working. Before we like jump right in, I started off. I was listening to a bunch of your records and songs leading up to this, and trying to prepare some notes so I don't fall off the task here. But I feel like a good way to kind of start with you was re-listening a few times to the song "That's Where I'm From." And it paints. I feel like it paints a really good picture, maybe of a little. I mean, that whole album is pretty autobiographical, but it's a kind of. I feel like it's a good lead into my first question: is kind of where you grew up and what first led you into your love for music.
Yeah, so I didn't really grow up, for the most part, in any one place. My family moved almost on average of once a year until I was about 12. But I was born in a little town in Pennsylvania, or little-ish town, York, and lived in Lancaster and a few other towns around there, 4 or 5 other towns. And then we moved to Virginia for a while, and I lived in Waynesboro and Charlottesville. a few places in each of those towns, as I recall. And then we moved to North Carolina, and we moved from a couple little towns near Raleigh, and we eventually settled on a sort of a do-it-yourself. I forget the word now. What's the word for a do-it-yourself farm? Like a not self-sustaining, but growing our own vegetables was the idea, and like sort of self-subsistence. Why words leaving my brain? But yeah, we ended up in this little town called Creedmoor, or outside this little town. And so, like, that's where I'm from, which is like an account of a guy's life that moved from a farming upbringing, like a hard scrabble upbringing, to a suburban adulthood. He's trying to provide things for his kids that he didn't have when he was a kid, and he ends up, totally foreseeably, and but ironically, um, there were walls between him and his kids because they don't have quite the same values or the same, at all the same set of experiences. So that, yeah, that song's like, I don't know, 70% autobiography probably.
So when so you're moving around a lot as a kid, and during that time, when you were young, did you already discover music? Was it a big part of your life, or when did it become a big part of your life?
Oh yeah, that was your question, wasn't it?
Well, no, no, it was a lead in from the
That was, that was definitely part of the question. Just really from as early as I remember, like I'm doing a thing for Merle Fest in North Carolina later this week, which was canceled. And so the music of Doc and Merle Watson, as I was going to mention on that video, was, I seem to remember from when I'm like 3 years old, definitely 4 years old. And around that time, I just remember pretty strongly hearing the music that my parents were listening to, which was that, like bluegrass, like Country Gentlemen, and Doc, and Earl Scruggs, and things like that, and also the folk music at the time, which was like Ian and Sylvia and Gordon Lightfoot and Patrick Sky and a few others. So that was kind of what their tastes were, and then just growing up, the Beatles were big back in the day, late '60s, early '70s, and I got into that stuff. The Beatles and Bob Dylan and a few other popular acts. And through the years, like I'm 57 now, and through the years, it seems like every 5 or 7 years, I'm kind of on a different subchapter of the musical journey. Just my tastes kind of shift a little bit and kind of expand a little bit at the same time. So a lot of really a lot, probably most of what I was hearing initially when I was a little kid, all that stuff that I just mentioned, and especially Doc Watson, is still really firmly in the center of my vision for me, and still sounds great to me. And I don't know, I can't disentangle, how much of that value is from early memory and how much of it's because there's some objective quality in the music. But I do believe there's a lot of objective quality in the music of Doc Watson, for instance.
So from discovering that music as a kid and just absorbing it, when did you pick up your first instrument? And what it wasn't guitar, was it? It was banjo, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I started on the banjo when I was 7 and guitar when I was 11, and then more or less simultaneously fiddle and a few other things, but managed to narrow it down to almost just acoustic guitar. At by young adulthood, I goofed around with other things and always admired like guys like Stevie Wonder and John Hartford and Buddy Miller, to name three totally unlike sounding people. But all those guys, could play, any one of a half dozen instruments as well as another. But that's not me. This is my thing.
I love, like, as you talk about your kind of influences and people you admire, and admitting like they're kind of how they kind of interweave, but also very different. I feel like that's a quick description of the 13 records you've put out over the years. There's every one of them's got such variety and differences to them, and I know, like when I pick up Let's Kill Saturday Night compared to some of your recent stuff, it's just such a different. Some people might be like, "Oh, that's nice." I can't. They know the same guy.
Yeah, I imagine if you really paid attention to what I was doing, I think the voice, so to speak, not
Mm-hmm.
this voice obviously, but also the writerly point of view is strongly similar, even between different musical styles. I think that's the case.
Hmm.
Um, but you're right. I mean, guys in music and gals and bands and everybody else, I mean, they establish brands really, and I don't know how they do it because, I mean, obviously it's shrewd and it's smart to do that. And so in some ways, I wish I could do that, but I don't see how you just maintain an interest in music and do that. I just don't see it because,
Hmm.
every time something new hits my ear out of left field and really grabs me, and it's something that I haven't thought of before or heard in quite that way, I'm just really interested in that thing, and it ends up being, a lot of the time just incorporated into what you do.
Hmm. And then for sake for probably like keeping yourself just personally interested, not getting bored with the creative process, I would assume. I don't know, like all the different types of songs you've written. There's another artist that I'm a really big fan of. I don't know if you're familiar with or know Bob Schneider. And musically, you guys are different, but like career wise, there's a lot of similarities in like he's got. If I handed you like three or four Bob Schneider records, you'd be like, oh my god, that's this. Like you can hear the same voice, same guy, but the genre and the way he approaches the songwriting might be totally different on that one record versus the other. I feel like there's definitely that in the span of your records.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say that I'm unfamiliar. I know his name and keep
Oh yeah.
hearing about him a lot and haven't heard the music, but it's not too hard, I guess, to find examples. I mean, in country music, Marty Stewart and Johnny Cash are two people that have made a lot of dissimilar sounding records. And then outside of country, I think it's even easier to find examples. I mean, I named the Beatles, and then in jazz music, there's it's almost unusual that guys would be making the same record over and over again. And in jazz, it's sort of more incorporated in the idea. And maybe it's really kind of a jazz way of thinking that you're always learning, and you're and you go into a record and you think, okay, now this is a different project. I obviously don't want to do the same thing I just did. What is the next thing going to be?
I wonder, like, if the question, if someone, I mean, I hate when people ask people this question, but like, when someone asks you to, if you were to describe the type of music you make, would that answer be different from in '96 versus 2002 versus 2008 versus today, or would it be a similar answer?
Well, I've gotten more used to the question over the years. So, really, over the last 20 years, I almost always just say country,
Hmm.
and that's kind of a misleading because of what country sounds like when somebody turns on the radio. For the last 30 or 35 years, it sounded like very unlike what I do. But I think, as rooted in the country tradition as I am, and it just doesn't make quite sense for me to say anything else. And to say alt country, I think is about equally misleading because I think to compare what I'm doing to like to say that I'm in a tradition including Graham Parsons, yeah, but I mean, I would name somebody. It sounds like I'm insulting them, but I'm just not part of a lot of that tradition of alt country.
Well, I want to talk about your early years or early '80s moving to Chicago and that chapter of your life. But before we do that, can you give us a song?
Hmm. I'll do the one you named. Is that okay? It's a little on the
That
long side, but
that's great.
okay.
Please.
Back in the driveway, the end of the workday, and how fast that world disappears. A fresh lawn, a pine tree, a neighbor just like me that's worked all his life to get here. A man climbs as high as he can, but his heart belongs where it began. I can see in my mind's eye a shack on a hillside, mean Billy Goat on a chain, and Dad doing battle with dirt hard as gravel. In summers the crops never came. We'd shoot down a pheasant in flight and sing songs about Jesus all night. And that's where I'm from, where time passes slower. That's where I'm from, where it's yes ma'am and no sir. You can't tell I'm country, just you look closer. It's deep in my blood. Two cars, a picket fence, that's where I've come. Dirt roads and double wides, that's where I'm from. Night school on a fast track, and no cause to look back. That place put a scar on my soul. And I swore my young ones would never know hunger. Now the good life's all they know. Well, I've watched them grow, now I see. One thing separates them from me, and that's where I'm from, where time passes slower. That's where I'm from, where it's yes ma'am and no sir. You can't tell I'm country, just you look closer. It's deep in my blood. White collar and necktie, that's where I've come. Half naked in the moonshine, that's where I'm from. If you've ever heard Hank Williams sing, brother, you know the whole blessed thing. And that's where I'm from, where time passes slower. That's where I'm from, where it's just ma'am and no sir. You can't tell I'm country, just you look closer. It's deep in my blood. A long way down a hard road, that's where I've come. Someplace I can't go home to, that's where I'm from.
Oh man, the round of applause we don't get to hear very often these days.
Yeah, you get to hear a lot of the sound of one person clapping nowadays, don't you?
Exactly. Oh man, I don't know many like basically autobiographical, can't even talk, autobiographical songs that are just sum it up so perfectly and so nicely, and I don't know, I love that song so much. Thank you for playing it.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, autobiography. Like I've really steered clear of it for the first 25 years or so of my thing, and but for the last 10 years or so, it seems more and more like it's dumb to overlook all that. I mean, you collect more and more baggage as you go on, obviously, so you have more choices of stuff to deal with. But yeah, more and more, I like to just like think, oh, what happened to me, whether it was yesterday or 50 years ago, and then just go from there and kind of twist it and lie about stuff and distort this and that in order to suit your purposes. But to start from that basis, because a lot of times you can really project that you have lived this stuff, and I think that adds, you know, could potentially add some nice weight and value to the presentation of it.
That's really well put. Yeah, when you hear like a 23-year-old sing their autobiography, you're like, nah, I don't know. It's not this doesn't have the same effect.
Yeah, maybe that's the reason. Maybe that's, yeah. When I was 23, I felt like it was dumb to even pretend to add wisdom, and the way that song like presents wisdom, and that always felt really insincere and pretentious to me when I was young. But I mean, when you're young, you want to do something that's also authentic in a way. So I mean, for me, and I think for a lot of people, that was like, I'm angry at women, and I want to go out and fuck up the world or whatever. Can I curse on this? Or
You can do whatever you want.
oh yeah. So
Like
yeah,
you can't censor Robbie Fulks.
more of an impatience and more of a, I want to embrace the world or hit the world in the face. All this more perspective, emotion when you're younger, but now, yeah, it's all different.
Isn't that's also kind of what makes Hank Williams' records so even extra layered, like in amazingness, because he was like 27 or whatever when he died, and he wrote most of those songs when he was this age that was kind of like what we would consider like, would you listen to a 25-year-old sing about his divorce?
Right. I mean, I agree with that somewhat and disagree with somewhat, but I agree in the sense that, I mean, structurally his stuff is amazing. It's so formally perfect. The emotion of it sometimes does sound like a young man to me. It sounds like a self-pitying male person a lot of the time. So, I mean, there's an eternal quality to that, no doubt. And men never lose it throughout their lives, for better or worse. But yeah, I think if he had lived another 25 years, that he might not have been writing songs like, Wedding Bells Will Never Ring for Me, because that wouldn't have fit into a 50-year-old man's point of view. I don't know. Who knows what he would have been doing?
That's really well put. So going back to the timeline we were talking about here, so around 11 you picked up the instruments, you were playing guitar and you were learning, and then in high school were you playing or collaborating with other people? Did you have a band? Were you playing any like talent shows or anything along those lines yet?
Yeah, talent shows. Like the band thing was never really a strong template for me, even though I kind of wanted it to be. But I did a lot of solo playing. I started as a solo act when I was 15, playing in restaurants and bars and things like that. And then when I got to college, I tried joining a band and it didn't quite take. When I got out of college, yeah, I I continually joined bands for about a week or something over the years, and until I was how old was I? Must have been like 24, 25. I joined a bluegrass band, so maybe not quite the kind of band that people think of when they hear the word band, but we traveled around about 200 dates a year, and this is a band called Special Consensus. They've been around for a long time.
Chicago. Yeah,
In
Greg
Chicago.
Greg Cowhill or
Cahill, yeah,
Cahill, yeah.
or Cowsill. But yeah, that was sort of my first band, and it was fortunately it was a living. It was the first band I really put both feet into, and I did it as a job for 2.5 years, I guess.
Was the hole a hole in my heart album that band put out your first time recording on an actual album?
Yeah, on an album that came out commercially for sure. Through the years, I tried to go in the studio and figure that thing out. But yeah, that was really the first what you'd call a proper record, and that was 1988 or 9, 88 maybe. So yeah, so I would have been 25. So it took me a little while to get going, but I was a father in the meantime. I definitely had things going on in life, that kept me from really, going after it 100%. But yeah, 25 years old I must have been, and from there it wasn't too long or too hard to springboard into the thing I'm doing now. Putting out records under my own name.
So so it was the late '80s when you joined the Special Consensus band, bluegrass band. but you moved to Chicago in the early 80s. What brought you to Chicago? I mean, I know you moved around a lot, but it sounds like you did grow up in smaller towns and going from the dirt road, as you described it, to a mobile homes vibe, which, by the way, I'm from Missouri, so I totally see that
What
image.
part?
I'm from a little town called Ashland. It's right between Jefferson City and Columbia on Highway 63.
Sweet. Yeah, I've only gone through Jefferson City once, and I remember thinking that this looks like not exactly like any other place in the world. It's a city, but a tiny city, and you have to be wanting to go there to go through it almost.
For sure. I mean, I spent most of my time in Columbia, which is great because it's a college town. So, kind of like any other college town in a Midwest or Southern state, it's nice because you get a little bit more perspective other than just the super small town.
Did you go to school there?
I did, yeah.
Did you know
Uh,
Richard King, or did you interface
I
with
did.
him at all?
I never have worked with Richard King. I know of him, of course. He's for those listening, he's a promoter in Columbia that owns the venue that I saw. The first concert I ever saw was at the Blue Note in Columbia, or he did own it and operated it, and still does. I think shows there now, but not at Blue Note, but anyways, in the area. A legendary Midwest guy. But yeah, the Blue Note was where I saw the Foo Fighters in May of '98. My dad took us.
I bet that was a great show.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, like, so moving to Chicago, I mean, I mean, a huge city. What brought you there, and what was it a culture shock, kind of going to such a big environment and staying there for a pretty extended period of time?
Well, I moved from New York City, so for me it was
Oh,
like, I was thinking, oh, I'm coming to a cow town, which is literally how my boss in New York put it. He said, "Yeah, oh, that's a freaking cow town. You'll do fine, don't worry." People have snobbery from the East Coast, and but I just moved there because my girlfriend got pregnant, and we were thinking, where will we go? What do we do? And we thought, well, we'll move in with her parents who lived in Chicago, and so that was. That was it. That set the next 36 years of my life in place, pretty much. That's where I lived for most of my adulthood and raised my kids. It was around there. It was a great place to do that too.
It's a great city and a great area. It's one of my favorite cities, especially considering it's like in the Midwest. I love it there so much. My girlfriend's from there, so we get to go every year, and it's just one of my favorite places. So
Yeah.
what were you? So this is before you joined. So when you joined the special consensus bluegrass band, that became your full time gig. Was that your first time shifting from a day job and playing music solo at bars and stuff to a full time position in a group?
Yeah, I had kind of a couple meaningless day jobs over the years, but only for a few years. I think I was in Chicago for 3 years, maybe before I joined them. And then after I left them, I was kind of in limbo for another couple of years, doing temp work and working part time at the Old Town School of Folk Music, and then I did get a job working for a company uh, on Music Row in Nashville, just as a songwriter. So I just kind of eked out a living between those three things for a couple of years.
Yeah, I was gonna actually transition to that. So you were going back and forth to Nashville. You were still living in Chicago though, right? During that time.
Right.
So what was that like? I mean, that's a pretty solid haul back and forth, and you have your ins and out day jobs in Chicago, but you're also getting hired to write songs in Nashville. What was that time like, and what was the experience, and what was Nashville like then too, just compared to now even?
Um, I have some pretty good memories of Nashville in that time. Like it seemed like there was something bubbling up from under the surface. Like the commercial template was um, kind of unwelcoming because it was so set. Like Garth Brooks had this big sales breakthrough with No Fences, that record No Fences, in about 92 or 93. And that's about the time I started working there. And so, you know how it is in like a big business, like you can't, everything that comes out of the industry has to be exactly that until the next big thing comes along. And it was kind of that way. But bubbling up under the surface was like BR 549 and Tim Carroll, and just a year or two after that, Hank Williams III, and all of this different sounding stuff, which I mean you might call old country or East Nashville or whatever you call it. Um, but that was where I found sort of companionship, and that was where I found people to be friends with and maybe co-write a little bit with, and some of those guys are still around, and some of them aren't. But I think I think in a way that isn't quite logical, maybe. That scene had a strong impact on things that followed, and it still kind of felt like eventually the ice kind of broke a little bit when the Garth and then the Shania template kind of melted and allowed room for other things to come in. The things that came in, a lot of them were kind of influenced in a way from that 90s outside the boundary Nashville thing, I think.
That's
I'm no
cool.
expert, but I think, when I listen to the radio in the in the aughts, it was more interesting, more diverse, and more risk taking than it was during my tenure there.
Hmm. And you said that was around 1993, or it went up until about 93. You were doing that back and forth.
I started in '93, and
Oh,
my contract ran out in '98. So that was
okay.
I was a mid '90s guy.
So, but around 96 though, that's when you put out your the debut record, Country Love Songs. And so at what point did you feel like you were ready? Did you just have a batch of songs and you're like, we need to go to the studio with these, or did you have a vision for that record leading? I mean, what was the, yeah, maybe the story behind that record, and the excitement to put out your first debut of Robbie Fulks?
Yeah, it was super exciting for me, if not for a lot of other people. But that first record was kind of tailored to the people that put it out. It was a label, Bloodshot. They're still there, and I still work with them quite a bit. And they had an idea, like a mission, sort of, for their label, which was to appeal to people that liked country music, but they didn't like the way that commercial country music was going, and preferred something a little just a little older sounding, or weirder sounding, or harder sounding, or angrier sounding, any of the above. And so I looked at what they wanted to do and thought about the music that I like doing, and my own values. And I thought, well, I like music that sounds old, and I like lyrics that are you know um, risk taking, for lack of a better word, using a word I just used 3 minutes earlier. Uh, so that's what I tried to do for my first record. It was like a thought experiment. If you did a record that, if you came across a magical record that was the music was recorded in 1953, but somehow the guy singing the lyrics, the guy doing the singing was like, obviously in the here and now, with his concerns and his way of expressing himself, that it might sound like my first record sounded. And yeah, from there I just went forward with that label and its idea of country music that was kind of off-brand, like it shared some of country music's values, but was also kind of metropolitan, and had a little snarl in it, you might say.
Did they make any attempts to try to censor you when you, I mean, when you put, the word fuck in the title of a song, or just like, not just like the obvious kind of overt, like, oh, there's a cuss word in the song title, but like, just, I mean, I mean, you've always had this kind of dark humor to your side. And what's exciting about, for me, when I was discovering, like, going back to listen to all these old records, you've really, it's always been part of you for the most part. It's not like some new thing you do. You've always had that. Your humor still works its way into your songs. And so did the record labels ever try to be like, no, you can't do this, or you shouldn't do this because we can't sell this, or?
I think like during the first couple of years of my solo recording thing, yeah, Bloodshot and then Geffen after that, did react negatively to some songs that I wanted to include on the records, but not in the way that you're suggesting. Like I don't remember any pushback from Bloodshot on the word fuck. It was more the opposite, like the opposite thing. If I wanted to put something on one of their records that sounded too much like, Garth Brooks or something, uh, or much more toward the middle than that, even, like, well, you know what I mean, just something that sounded somewhat commercial, or sentimental, maybe, or just like da ba da ba da ba da ba da, then that would kind of trip their trigger, and they're like, I don't know if Bloodshot is really about da ba da ba da ba da ba da. And with Geffen, yeah, there was some stuff on the record that I made for them that they didn't care for. They didn't care for barroom rockers. They didn't care for. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, but by after 6 or 7 years into my thing, I just didn't come across that anymore from anybody, you know. And I worked with 2 or 3 different labels since then, and put out stuff myself. And certainly, you know, my own self, I never object to anything I do. That's always worked out well. But maybe something about getting older. People just like, he's going to do what he's going to do, you know.
Yeah, and I like that some of those songs that maybe were risque or whatever for a record end up being kind of the crowd favorites. I mean, to this day, people request all those the fun songs in between. I mean, that's another reason why I'm such a big fan of yours, and artists that fall in the, I don't know what category of, like, you can have a song that will literally send me the tears, and then like 5 seconds later have me rolling on the floor crying for a different reason because I'm laughing so hard. And the ability to turn that on and off and also be so musically composed and talented is I think that's in my opinion, like the perfect performer, songwriter, recording artist, to have
Well,
that.
those are the
That
acts
right.
that I like. So I just
Me
do
too.
the music that, you know, sounds like the groups that I like and the artists that I like. And so, you know, when you'd buy a Beatles record or a Buck Owens record or a Lubin Brothers record, or you'd go to their shows, it'd be exactly like you just said. They'd have sad ballads, tragic weepers, and then the bass player would step up with his blacked out tooth and do some routine about, you know, getting immunized down at the county or something like that, you know, some cornpone humor. And I love it both, and I love the stuff in between, you know. So I don't see well, not only do I see why you should have to pick one emotional tone, I just think it would be like deathly boring to have one emotional tone in your brand.
And also the element of surprise. I mean, there's times when you're playing and you're in between banter. It's like there's nothing that comes across to me as scripted. So it's like I don't know what he's going to say or do next, and what might happen in the audience that might send your thought process down a different path. Which to me, as an audience member who might come to see you more than once every time you come to my market or whatever, that's exciting and makes me want to drag friends along to see what's going to happen at the next show.
Well, that's kind of the idea, that every show is different, and so that you might want to see it more than once. And over the years, I've definitely gotten looser with the way that I talk to an audience. You know, it is like you say, it's not much thought out in advance.
Well, there's that, and then also the exciting element to your live performance that we've experienced in the Bay Area anyway, with the shows you and I have done, is it's almost a different variation of people you have in the band each time. Sometimes it's you solo, sometimes it's a 4-piece, sometimes it's just you and Shad, and that's a totally different type of performance of the songs when you add different layers of instruments and players. It's pretty cool.
I love it. I love the variety, and I love hearing how different people play my stuff. So,
Good transition to play another song for us. And while he's setting up there, if you're just joining us, this is Robbie Fulks, and you're watching Casey Turner Presents Talk to Me, my new podcast, livecast thing while I'm sitting here at home. And I'm just happy I get to phone up these guys and have them talk for a little bit. So if you're watching, please do comment below and share this with your friends. Help us get as many people watching as possible. Also, in the comments below, you'll see a link to Robbie's website for merchandise records so you can buy his stuff. And if you want to toss a tip to help support the live conversation, that's much appreciated because all I do is sell t-shirts now, and it's depressing.
who was
But
the last guy you
anyway,
talked to?
the last person I talked to was a San Francisco songwriter. His name is Sam Chase.
What kind of
And
music is
then
that?
Sam is he's got a 7-piece kind of orchestral band. I think they call themselves badass folk music, but he's a great writer, and he's got like a really like a hard burned whiskey kind of voice. So he kind of talks like this a little bit, and he's hilarious. But his songs are really poignant and they're really self-reflective and talk a lot about everything from addiction and just kind of your role in the world. But it's really great. So, and we're about the same age, and I've done a couple shows with him, and it's a fun guy to talk to. Great guy to drink whiskey with. That guy is fun.
Ah,
Yeah.
that probably describes a lot of the people that play at your series. I'm imagining. I mean, just having done it with John, Doe and hearing about this guy, and then there's me. Like a lot of big drinkers in that community.
Some of them are. I mean, I don't know if John Doe's a big drinker,
Oh,
maybe,
okay.
but then
Rhett
like
Miller, he's a big drinker.
Yeah, I've never worked with Rhett before. I also work with a lot of guys who have been sober for a long time. Like the next person I'm talking to is this Thursday with Steve Poltz,
But
and
that means they're alcoholics, and Steve was definitely an alcoholic.
100%. That's a good point.
He's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
He hasn't gotten
He's
less
great.
funny since he quit drinking, has he? He's still funny.
No, he hasn't. He's gotten more funny because he can compose himself without falling off the stage or kicking somebody. And also, I don't know if you knew this. About 5 or 6 years ago, he had a stroke on stage,
I
and
heard
he
that,
hasn't
but I
got.
didn't know it was on stage. That's wild.
It was in Wilmington, Delaware, upstairs at the. I think what's the place called there in
The place from Philadelphia too,
World.
World Cafe.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. And like he was playing the small room, and yeah, he blacked out on stage, and they rushed him to the hospital. It's a crazy story, but he came out of it. He said he feels like he's stoned all the time now, and he loves the Grateful Dead, and he's not kidding.
Steve Poltz.
What are you gonna do?
It's a
Robbie
wonderful story.
Fulks, take us away with the song, Robbie.
We came up the hill to meet him in the dirt patch. He was weeding. That was our first look at Aunt Peg's new old man. Now Uncle Hank was 75. He lived well, and then he died, and none of us had nothing against her new old man. She liked his fiddling, no doubt, liked his help in the rural route, and the rest didn't bear thinking about Aunt Peg's new old man. Now we sat down and we got fed a long grace, but what a spread. The chicken was just an hour dead, and the stew was made of barley. I pulled out my banjo after a while, but he didn't like the Scruggs style. Listen up, boy, this here's called Going Down to Raleigh. Going down to Raleigh. Going down to Raleigh. Going down to Raleigh. Now it ain't Peg begun to frail, and they got going on the Texas gales. Hit my ears like an awful wail. I wish I could hear it again. No, he had no use for the modern stuff. His back was strong, his hands were rough, but he rocked her old age. Sure enough, Aunt Peg's new old man. Now they played dances and made the rounds. Gay lads to Rocky Mount. The tunes they knew no one could count. It was all in their heads and hands. And you could do worse as a widow than to find a man to spade and hoe and raise a little hell with a long bow and peg. New old man. Yeah, she liked his fiddling, no doubt. I liked his help in the rural route, and the rest did not bear thinking about Aunt Peg's new old man. She liked his fiddling, no doubt. I liked his help in the rural route, and the rest I don't want to think about Aunt Peg's new old man.
Oh man, Robbie Fulks, ladies and gentlemen, send those hearts flying. I think that's the equivalent of clapping these days. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. One thing that I mean, I think a lot of people really do talk a lot about your songwriting and your, guitar playing. Obviously, because it's so great. I don't hear a lot of people talk. I mean, your vocals are the way you sing. You're a great singer, and I'm curious. Did you go through any training singing, or is this something you just developed over the years by performing in those bars, trying to project over the loud crowds? Where did you kind of discover your voice and that you could hit them notes?
I'm going to answer you as soon as I plug this in because I'm seeing this running low on battery.
Okay, no problem.
One moment.
while he's unplugging or plugging in his battery. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. If you haven't had a chance to share this, please share this. We've still got some time left here, and we'd love to get more people watching. Also, comment below. Let us know your favorite Robbie Fulks song or record, or maybe where you first discovered his music. And if you are just now discovering his music, you're welcome because he's awesome. And again, this Thursday we have Steve Poltz joining the live conversation, so be sure to check back and tune in for that ride. It'll be fun. It's kind of cool, like the rule of no shorts on stage or whatever. You just don't have to worry about that with the live streams,
Yeah, I've done live shows in my pajamas during this pandemic, and I think I play at my best when I'm in pajamas, is what I've learned. So I think people are going to be seeing more of that when things return to normal next year or whenever. Yeah, to answer your question, no training in anything, and so I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go along. Mm-hmm. It does help to hear your voice back, in the recording studio, and whatever. Yeah, mostly on records. It's like, I sound like that, I didn't mean to sound like that, and so I made little tonal adjustments along the way based on what I'm hearing back, through playback and stuff like that. But in general, I'm working with limited resources here, and there's only so much you can tailor it.
Well, I mean, you have a great tone that clearly kind of just rips through the mix. And so, at some point, when did you realize that you could be a lead singer of a project? Did you envision yourself being the leader of a band when you were involved in the '80s?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, when I was a kid, even in the early '70s, I thought, well, I'll be a guy that makes records and has records that come out and have my name on the records. And so, I mean, that just sort of implies not only that you'll sing it, but that you'll write it. That's what I always thought I'd be doing.
Well, and I mean, obviously you've got a nice country tone, whatever that means, bluegrass tone. But that third record you put out, Let's Kill Saturday Night, is kind of more of a rock. I feel like it's more of a rock record, electric guitars, a different approach to how you wrote the songs and singing. And also, Lucinda Williams is on that record. Can you talk about the process of that record a little bit, and also working with her and third record in, you're working with Lucinda Williams. That's pretty great.
Right.
Pretty cool.
Well, the third record in, I got to go to a different label, and it was a big label, and they let me, I kind of got a little bit more carte blanche, because unlike Bloodshot, which, as I mentioned, had a mission and they had kind of a theme to their label, this label didn't have a theme. So the whole point of my going to that label was to do a wider variety of stuff. And as for the rock thing, the way the record turned out to be sequenced, which was influenced by the way that the people at the label wanted to sequence it, did tilt it toward that identification. But if you would sequence those 12 or 13 songs in a different way, it wouldn't have come off quite the way that you're saying. So it had some traditional country music on it. It had softer folky stuff on it. But the first 4 songs that came out of the speakers when you put it on are like bam, 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 bam.
Which for a fan of yours at the time, having your first 2 records, that might be a surprise for them.
It was definitely an unpleasant surprise for some people. And it wasn't the way that I think I would have preferred to sequence it. But anyway, that's done. And one of the nice things about that record was that I got to invite a lot of like heroes and people that I wanted to, to work with, or, to make music with, to be on the record. And that included Sam Bush and Bill Lloyd and John Huey and Lucinda. And so the thing with Lucinda was that I had not met her, and my bass player was her boyfriend, or had been her boyfriend. I don't think he was right then. And so that was my connection to her. I just had asked him to call her and come down. We set a date because I was working on the record all week long. And she said, well, I'll come down on Tuesday afternoon. And Tuesday afternoon came and went. And I said, well, what do you think she is? And my bass player, he said, well, you can't really expect her just to show up when she says she's going to show up. She'll show up eventually, I think, he says, but don't expect her to keep an appointment necessarily. And so I called her that night. She's like, "Oh yeah, I got in the car to go down there, but then I stopped at a store and I started looking at the things on the shelves, and then I got back in the car and I was lost all of a sudden." And she had the story about getting lost on the way to the studio, which was like 2 minutes from her house. And so we set another date for the following Thursday at 10. And then Thursday comes and 10 comes. She's not there. 11 comes. She goes, well, 11:30, she kind of walks in and she says, yeah, what song are we doing? And I played it for her. And the song was like, it wasn't a very good song, but I played her the song and she said, well, what do you want me on it for? It's already fine without me on it. And I said, well, I love, that record, the one with Passionate Kisses on it is one of my favorite records ever, really. I think you're so unbelievable at what you do. And I love your singing voice. She says, well, I'm not like a bluegrass singer. Like, I just can't like ride on top of you like that all the way through. I said, yeah, I know what you do, but I think it's just going to be great. Whatever comes out of your mouth, I think is going to be killer. So by now it's like 12:30 and we've just goofed around, and talked and this and that. And then she goes, I don't know, is this an interesting story? It's almost done.
No, it is. Yeah, I love it. This is awesome.
I mean, anybody that knows her even a little bit from watching her thing over the years knows what I'm talking about. She's like halfway on a different planet, but she goes into the bathroom and she went in the bathroom for 45 whole minutes. And so now we're like from 12:30 to 1:15 and the record project is just held up, by this one person who we're waiting for. And nobody knows what I'm thinking, is she getting high in there? What's she doing? She having a hookup or what's she doing? And she came out of the bathroom. I think she just done some stuff with her hair, maybe used the toilet and done some stuff with her eyes. And anyway, we went to the vocal booth and listened to the thing, which I think we'd already recorded the instruments on it. And she just kind of howled over it with me, on a single mic, if I remember. We kind of howled together and we took 2 passes at it, listened back to it. It was like a mess, it was all over the place, but in my mind, it was a great mess. I loved the way it sounded, and that's what we kept for the record. It's just really, it's kind of unscripted and unprepared and undisciplined too, but I love the way she sings, and that's the end of the story.
For those of you that haven't heard the song's called Pretty Little Poison, and it's on the record Let's Kill Saturday Night. You can check it out. And
it's not too good. I mean, the song's not that good. The guitar solo and her vocal are really good.
That's a good story. I mean, I feel like, we obviously don't have time to do it, but, it would take hours to go through the timeline of all your records and hear all these ins and outs and rad stories that you've got. And I mean, this is kind of a serious question. Have you started or thought about writing a book about your career and life? Because it's super fascinating as I was putting this together.
No, not really. I think that's
I'd read
pretty self-aggrandizing. I was thinking, like, every other day I'm doing one of these video things, during the pandemic. So I had thought about maybe I'll do like a video and incorporate some autobiography and talking into it but we're doing this now, so this takes the place of that.
Fantastic. I just oops, my light just fell off my table. That's great. That's how you do it. There we go. My amazing merch table light is my studio light. Anyways, well, I would read the book for sure, and I feel like for people who haven't had the opportunity to discover you and your music for whatever reason, maybe they're living under a rock or they're finally coming to find out about you. I don't know. There was some spin article or quote that said something like the most underappreciated songwriter of our time. I feel like people who love you do appreciate you, but for whatever reason, there are a lot of people that haven't discovered you. And every time we come back to the Marin County, San Francisco area, I feel like the audience is larger every time when we have you. So I don't know. I'm excited to get more people turned on to your music as we
I appreciate
progress,
all your help over the years, for sure. You got such enthusiasm for the project, and I think part of it is, not that you're that young of a man, but you've got like a lot on other promoters in terms of youth. And so I think the energy and enthusiasm is really working in your favor.
Thanks, man. Well, it's always been a pleasure working with you. I want to talk about just a couple more little things here. I got a couple fan questions for us, and then we'll end with a song, if that's okay with you. I don't want to graze over these two little moments. So in 2010, you put out the Michael Jackson covers, the album Happy. Um, what what did Michael Jackson musically mean to you? I mean, to put out a whole cover album obviously is very important to your musical taste, but approaching those, if you haven't heard the record out there, it's really great, and it's your take on all these songs. And it's how much time did it take to compose those and make them your own? And it must have been a really fun project.
So fun, yeah. It was one of those things I didn't want it to end. It was like the Linda Gale Lewis record that I did a couple years ago. I just didn't want it to end, and for that reason, it did just go on for a while. But the Michael thing, was well, it was probably like 10 or 11 years from start to finish because I abandoned it. When the pedophilia charges were coming out, that looked pretty bad for the record, and it was like really counter to the spirit of the record. The spirit of the record was like, it was part about him but a lot not about him. I mean, the part that was about him was like when I was like 7 years old and the Jackson 5 was going strong. It was just one of those exciting things. It was like Paper Moon starring Tatum O'Neal. When you're a little kid and you see like a celebrity that's your age that's out there and it's like kicking ass. It's very inspiring. So to see this, and he was maybe even, no, he was a year or two older than me, I think. But anyway, a kid performer that's that unbelievably talented. I mean, come on. There's been nobody, almost nobody as talented as that at the age of 8 or 9 that you can think of in music. So a very inspiring person. But the other thing was that that anybody that's had a career that long and through that many phases of popular music and music production, there's just so much potential material to work with. If you're doing a tribute record and it covers that guy, covering like 30 some years of his career, it's like, oh, that's fun. How would I ever transmute the music of the early 70s, the rhythm and blues thing, or the music that like the Rodney Jenkins era of the early aughts, which is like so different. And then the stuff in between, the Quincy Jones stuff, like how would a country singer with a small budget to work with ever like make anything out of that? So the record was partly like, how would you ever do that? Like, how would I translate that into my voice at all? It was totally fun, and I just couldn't stop it. So eventually he died, and I put it out there.
I mean, the way you attract your fan base must be so interesting. If people discover you through that record, and then you wrote them into your country sound or your stage persona. I don't know. I think it's really rad, and it is a really great project. If you all haven't checked that out, Happy. It's Robbie Fulks' take on Michael Jackson covers, and it's really great. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, which you kind of already did a little bit there, was the Wild 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 album you did with Linda Gale Lewis. So when you put that out in 2018, the first time I ever got to hear any of those songs was at Americana Fest in Nashville. I felt so, it was like the last day of Americana Fest. And I'm so happy I went to that showcase because it was you and Linda Gale Lewis and Red Volkert up there rocking out. And it was the coolest band. And it was so much fun to watch. And you and Linda together is amazing. And that album really just, you show up on records, and not everyone does. I don't think everyone. Sometimes it's just all about the live performance, and maybe the record kind of half resembles that. But this record, and amongst many of your other ones, really do kind of resemble what you do. But talk about working with Linda Gale Lewis and that project. And you said you never wanted it to end, so it must have been a really fun time.
Oh, so fun, so fun. It started as me producing her, and then it ended as a duo record. For various reasons, but anyway, it did end up with me singing a couple songs on the record, and even from the beginning, the writing element was there for me. Whatever record it was, I would have been writing a lot of it, and so I wrote a lot of tunes to her experience and history and her voice and way of singing, and that's always fun. It's always great to have a little project like that. That's sort of it's like on spec almost, and what else are you wanting to know about it? I can't remember.
I was just curious, just how much fun you had, and also taking that record and performing live with her. You guys had such a great dynamic on stage, and for those of you who don't know, Linda Gale Lewis is Jerry Lee Lewis's sister, and she's a mad piano player. I would say like I would put her piano chops and your guitar chops on the same kind of playing field. So watching you guys play on stage together and trade off solos and just have so much fun, it just bled off to the audience, and that must have been fun because you guys did a good tour with that record, but not in every market. Anyways, how was that playing live with her and showcasing that record to your fans?
Yeah, I think we played, if you made a line going Texas up to Chicago, kind of a squiggly line like that, everywhere on that line in East, but we didn't get to the West Coast on it, and we didn't get to Europe on it, unfortunately, but maybe one day.
Yeah, I was hoping to
Um,
get that call. Maybe you guys were going to bring it out to California, but
I mean, yeah, it was an expense for sure. It's a five-piece band and a sound man, and you know, if you're talking about players as good as Red, you can't pay him $60 a gig or something like that. I guess maybe you could. I don't know. I should try it. Uh, Band was phenomenal, and she's like, her ringside seat at a lot of musical history was a primary reason that I was interested in her. Even if she wasn't a great pianist like she is, and a great singer like she is, just hearing the stories of, interacting with, everybody, not just her brother, but other rockabilly guys, Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, just firsthand stories of all those people. Uh, Great to hear the stories. Great to be inspired by her sort of survivor optimistic survivor attitude. Been through, I think, 8 marriages, and and half of them before she was 19 years old, probably. I think she started getting married when she was 14, and growing up with nothing, and then suddenly having a lot of things, and then working all over with her brother's band for all those years, and being the only woman in it. Just what a crazy, interesting perspective, and to have come out of it, with intelligence and sense of humor intact. What a strong person. So, um, and she's one of the people. Yeah, I just feel happier to be around her. And since I tend to be a little bit on the depressive side, I found that just working hand in glove with her made my life feel more rounded while we were working together. And that's totally apart from what you're talking about, the fun of the performance and trading solos and working with those great players. But it was a really happy group of people to spend the fall of 2018 with.
well, that's your latest record you've worked on and put out, was the Wild 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 with her, and then prior to the Upland Stories was the year before.
Well, I put out two things in 2019, and they were both a little bit under the radar because they're just my things. But one is a flash drive. People can find it on my website. It's got 3.5 hours or so of music on it that's not on my other records, and it's studio productions of stuff of songs that I made up. And the other one is a vinyl only reinterpretation of Bob Dylan record called Street Legal, and my record's called 16, and it's somewhat in the spirit of that Michael Jackson thing that we were just talking about. Is reinterpreted through my of this old record of Bob's.
And those are available on your website, both of those.
Correct.
So I'll put links to that down below, so you can go and explore the Robbie Fulks store on his website. Got a couple fan questions here. Close out with the song, and this has been great, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Been fun.
Yeah, I also love you got your vinyl collection on display right behind you there. Is that something is that one you've been working on for a while, or are do you listen to your records a lot?
Yeah, I love records, and we moved here about a couple months ago, and all my CDs are in the garage, so I don't even really have the choice of listening to CDs. It's just like the old turntable, and most of these I've had since the year 1980. Um, Probably when did records start? CDs started in 1990, so most of this is predates that. When I came across it. But I've got a lot of horrible stuff in here that I would never ever listen to. I just grab something at random,
Okay.
and that would be the Long Riders. And this is nothing against the Long Riders, but I listened to that when I bought it, in 1980, whatever. But I not since then, and I'm just working on acquiring the entire Blue Note catalog, one re-release at a time. And if I ever get all of that in hand, then I'll have enough to listen to for the rest of my life. But in the meantime, there's like half of this stuff I would never listen to again.
But it does
Oh,
look.
sorry to
It
say
makes you.
Griffin there. That's awful.
But it makes you to look really. It makes you look a lot cooler when you have a lot of records.
Yeah, it's a good background for a thing like this.
Yeah,
That's all.
exactly. Okay. All right. So our first question comes from Amber Sweeney, who's a songwriter who's actually opened up
I
for you
know her.
before. Yeah. So her question is, do you feel that "Fuck This Town" fits other cities besides Nashville?
I don't know her. Amber Sweeney. I know Amber Digby and I know Sunny Sweeney, but who's Amber Sweeney?
She says she's opened up for you in the past. She's a songwriter based in Portland, Oregon. Big voice, super sweet.
Oh, okay. I know who you're talking about now. Um, and the question is, yeah, I think if you just took the hook line and the chorus, that you can just sing it and apply it to your own town. Everybody hates his own hometown, right?
And also, whenever this is kind of a follow up on my half on this question, but I mean, I assume you play that song in Nashville, and you probably love playing that song in Nashville. But do you ever get any kind of? Do you play it in Nashville? Do you piss people off with it?
Well, definitely. When I wrote it in the '90s, I played it a lot in Nashville. I mean, that's one that gets boring after a while. So, it came out on a record and I played it 100 or 200 times. And then, like, I'm getting kind of sick of playing that. So I don't play it too much anymore.
Makes sense. All right. Dirk Wise asks, what was the experience like
Is that a
performing?
porn name? Dirk Wise?
That is a good. That would be a really good. That would be a great porn name. I'm sure he's watching this and he's probably thinking to himself, yeah, yeah, it is a good porn name. Thanks, Mom.
Good pandemic job. Porn.
what what was the experience like performing Canapolis, a moving portrait like?
Fantastic. I mean, there again, like to do a job on spec is great, but to do a job where you're somebody's side man, there's a lot of days when I think I just give up the band leader thing and be a side man for the rest of my days. That would be pretty cool because you can just look at the fretboard of your instrument and you can let the lead guy, or in that case woman, do the job and think about your own role and hear the whole. For some reason, when you're standing in the middle and up front, it's hard to somehow everybody's eyes on you blocks your ears from hearing the totality of everything. I'm starting to sound like a mystic, but it's kind of true. And when you're standing off to the side of somebody, um, you can really focus on the music a little bit better, or I can. So Canapolis was a project. It was like multimedia, and you've got a movie going of like Depression era images, moving images over here, and then you've got a three-piece little group playing country and old-time music here, and then there's sound effects. So it's kind of an all possible sounds and images kind of a deal coming at you. It's a beautiful collection of motion picture photography from mid 30s Depression era North Carolina, and I think that's reached the end of its cycle. I think we have one or two more on the books, but if you haven't seen it and that sounds interesting to you, then I would encourage you to fly out to wherever doing it next year. Hopefully, post COVID times, those dates will come through.
Uh, Josepha Snyder asks, "What would your perfect day look like?"
Josepha and Amber, and who's the other one? Dirk.
Dirk.
This is turning into like it sounds like names out of the Ruddles or something. They don't sound like real people's names. But are you sure these are real people?
I'm pretty sure. I know Dirk is. Actually, I know they all are because I've seen them all at shows.
Oh,
And
you know these
Amber
people.
for sure. She's open. Yeah.
Yes, I know Amber is real. Yeah, my perfect day. This might sound kind of offensive, but a lot of these coronavirus days have been like my perfect day because I get up not very early and I read a little bit from a book and then walk the dog and then play some guitar and then make a relaxed meal, play bananagrams with my wife. At the end of the day, I'm watching some 1940s movie or something, and you know, I've got as much stress about what lies ahead as anybody, I suppose. But the days as they're playing out right now are just fucking great. I mean, they're great.
I like that. Is Bananagrams your guys' go-to connective game?
Yeah, we play charades if there are people over, but we can't really have people over, so it's bananagrams.
I like it. Michael Rufo asks, "Are you partial to a particular guitar pick?"
Yeah, I for a long time it was something different, but this is one of the like I've got a Collins guitar, and for a long time I resisted getting one because it's really obvious, you know. They've got a really consistent quality, and all the good flat pickers know about Collins out of Austin, Texas, and they stay in tune all the way up the neck. They're like and they're they're cheap compared to getting a vintage Martin or something. So I eventually bit the bullet, and I thought, oh, I'll just be a Collins guy, like all of those lawyers that flat pick and can afford a $4,000 guitar or something. Now I'll be one of those guys. But I've never regretted it because I love the guitar. And so anyway, the flat pick is the same way because I resisted these for a while, and they're blue chip.
Blue chip.
And all of the bluegrass guys are into them. They come from out of I think Knoxville, Tennessee, around there, and they're expensive. Like this one is 40 or 50 bucks, and so you put it in your pocket and you just try desperately not to lose it. And I've got an extra one or two in the guitar case in case my pocket has a hole in it. But I wish I had a different pick handy so that you could hear the difference. But it's got a real nice glide to it. It's beveled on the edge and on all the edges, so you can play it this way or this way or this way. It doesn't have a particular, orientation to it. And it's made out of a material that they're a little bit secretive about. But as you can hear, I think you can hear through this mic, like you can hear a little bit of the percussive quality of the pick, but just enough, like not so much that it distracts you from the tone of the note. And then of course, if you combine it with fingers, then even less pick quality. But I hope that comes through. I really love the way these sound and feel.
It is remarkable if you take like a Dunlop or whatever normal plastic pick and strum your guitar and then strum it with the blue chip. It is like two different instruments. It's pretty amazing.
So you've used them too. You're a picker as well. I forgot.
I've got a blue chip. I bought the $5 leather case for it, so it's harder to lose it.
Right. Right.
But
did you get one of these big guys or one of those?
I've got the jazz, the large jazz one. It's the smaller one. It's somewhere,
more of a teardrop shape or like this triangle shape?
More of the here. I'll grab it. One second. We should get sponsored by Blue Chip for this. So I got the little leather case. See, it's the big jazz large 60.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think I could be pretty happy.
And
with that
check this shit out because my name is really small. I got my name on the back.
How much did that cost you?
It's like another $5. You're if you're already that far in, you're like, okay, whatever. Let's just do this.
Yeah, I don't know if I would get my name. I would put like Susanna Hoffs on the other side or something like that.
There you go. I think you only get 3 characters.
Which also means be quiet for the performance, SH. I've got this like this. I like this one too, but it's a lot thicker than the one that. Anyway, this is totally boring.
So you're kind of changing different picks. It's kind of like golfing between how much lead you're going to be playing versus how much strumming you're going to be playing, I assume.
Not really. I just bought some different kinds to see which I like the best, and they're too expensive for me to throw away. But this is the one that I like the best.
Nice. And if you lose one, you got one in your back pocket.
Exactly.
Mark Arelli, another songwriter, he asks, have you ever collaborated with Chuck Prophet? And he says he can't be the only one who wants to hear that collaboration.
Mark's a great guy. I may be even more familiar with Mark's music than Chuck's, weirdly enough. But I have played with Chuck 2 or 3 times where I've opened for him, I think is what it was. And I do, and I obviously I like his music a lot. And Mark I have a more recent experience with. And so in short, I'd be thrilled to collaborate with either of them. Isn't Mark a great singer though?
Yeah, I've seen Mark play once in a house concert in San Francisco, and I think also maybe at Folk Alliance. I'm more familiar with Chuck, so I've heard Chuck way more than Mark. But
I guess most people have, but Mark, I heard I was opening for Laurie McKenna at a couple of shows, and that's how I met him and hooked up with him. And then I bought his record not long after, the mixtape record. His range is like, I don't know, it's a 2.5 octave range or something, like in full chest voice.
That's great. Well, maybe check out Mark Aureli, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't heard him before. Yeah, when I was talking to Chuck Prophet the other day. He had called to check in, and I told him about this series because I'm trying to get him to hop on there. He's like, "We'll do it. I'll get on there, man." That's my Chuck impression. And he goes, "Oh, you got Robbie Fulks coming up. He's a real smart guy. He's a real smart guy." I'm like, "Cool."
Smart guy.
Made me
Yeah, I
nervous.
don't know that our aesthetics totally. Well, I know they don't totally overlap because now I'm remembering. Like, I did a gig at the City Winery with Chuck, and we were talking in the room downstairs, and he was talking about records that were important touchstone records for him. And I think they're important touchstones records for a lot of people, like Rolling Stone records and stuff like that. And I was just thinking, oh yeah, I don't know anything about what he's talking about.
Mm.
He was
Well,
like,
when we did that co-bill with the John Doe co-bill that I put together, I mean, I feel like you guys are very different. But to me, as a fan and also as a promoter, you don't get to do this as much like they got to in the old days. But to me, pairing up artists that have a lot of differences between them is an exciting show versus like having it back to back be the same. I'd rather like see you and Chuck Prophet than like John Doe and Chuck Prophet, only because it'd be such a different variety and I don't know, a different collaboration. It'd be kind of cool. Maybe that's
yeah,
the interest.
well, I'd like to see. I'd like to see me and Annette Peacock and Catherine Russell on a bill. Me and me and those people. That would be a really weird bill. Nobody like one another. There's a I don't know. Just throwing that out there in
I'd
case.
like to see you with like Steve Poltz would be like an overload, or like Dan Byrne. I think that'd be a really fun show.
I'm saying these
Um,
ideas are too obvious. It's all like white
right,
singer-songwriter guys of a certain age. Where
right.
does Chuck live, though?
San Francisco.
Oh, okay. So he's not too far away.
I
And
see
he's
him
still
walking
married
around.
to that same lady?
Stephanie Finch. Yeah,
Okay. Well, tell him hello.
I will. I 100% will. Just a couple more questions here. Jim Jacobs asks. He wants to know about your connection to Katie and Tim Tutton. I hope I said that correctly. The owners of the Hideout in Chicago, and also wants to praise them for the good work that they've been doing for indie Chicago venues.
Yeah, Katie and Tim own a bar where I played a lot, the Hideout in Chicago, and uh, and they're people that you don't forget once you meet them. I mean, especially Tim. Tim's like a whirling dervish or a Tasmanian devil, something like that.
Yeah, I know that. I meant to. I didn't get to touch on it in the original interview here, but that residency that you had at the Hideout was pretty important to your career. I know a lot of people who have moved out here from Chicago or been traveling through. When they see your name, people message me or whatever. And they always say, "Oh, I used to go to his Hideout shows. I think on Mondays." How long was that residency for?
It was a little over 7 years, and it was every Monday night, except the ones where I was out of town. So probably 40 Monday nights a year for 7 years, 2 months. And each show was, well, ostensibly each show was different from the last. Each show was different from the last, but ostensibly no shows repeated, over that time. But in fact, I think I repeated 9 or 10 of them, especially in the last year. As it drew down, I returned to some themes and ideas that I'd used in the past. But anyway, I learned a lot of new music for it, like for whatever reason, it's shameful to admit, but I had never learned a single Charlie Parker head in my life until the show where we did Charlie Parker music. We did a mashup of Charlie Parker and Graham Parker. And for some of each of those two guys, we just did it straight, and same thing with Leonard Cohen. I never really heard much Leonard Cohen music, learned any Leonard Cohen song by heart, and uh, and so to come across guys like that or women, um, and learn their music, I mean it's great. Like everybody should do that. The music's great, and then to collaborate with the people too. The collaborators on that run were unbelievable, from Jenny Scheinman, Rosie Flores,
It's
Michael
great.
Shannon. Um, who else was? And then Steve Frisbee, Nora O'Connor, Kelly Hogan, and a bunch of people nobody's heard of, but that are great musicians.
That's awesome. I feel like residencies like that. I try to tell local bands here to try to find a way to do that. Again, back to the Bob Schneider kind of like reference. He does that every Monday at Saxon Pub in Austin, and it sounds like just like a similar thing in the sense where it's like you get to. I mean, you're doing more theme nights and working out all this material, but I mean, it makes you such a better player playing every Monday with a group of folks, and I mean, you're fearless when you walk on stage. I'm sure those all those hideout gigs definitely added to your.
You're just
Uh,
stupid. I mean, after you've done it 10 or 20 times, like, oh yeah, sure, I'm going to go play some Charlie Parker music for people. Like that's pretty stupid to think that I'm going to go do that. But after you've done it a few times, you're just like, yeah, how bad could it be? 60 people, nobody's recording, maybe they'll forget about it and on to the next week.
that's awesome. Well, we're about out of time here. Would you mind leaving us with a song?
Okay. I'll do one from the Wild, Wild, Wild recording. Swinging doors in Whiskey River. The first words I learned to say. Willie Merle and all those outlaws was all that Daddy'd ever play. These beer joints where I'm working, I started working at 16. Now if I look a little ragged, must be those 30 years between. My first single hit the big time. For a while there I was hot. I can't recall the early 90s. These last 10 I'd rather not. And there are mornings when I wonder what I can show for all my time. Oh, but I sure can sing with feeling. Whiskey River, take my mind. This honky-tonkin' way of living, I've been living way too long. Excuse me if I'm late for heaven, I just lived a country song. Now at this Super 8 in Reno, a couple screaming through the walls. I'm laying in my jeans and dreaming about a girl at Omaha. But that's been 20 years and counting. I can't go back there anyhow. No, I've hitched my wagon to a heartache. And God, I'm sleeping with it now. This honky-tonkin' way of living will make the weak out of the strong. Don't tell your troubles to me, mister, until you've lived a country song. When that lost highway finds you, them family ties won't bind you, no matter how your mama may try. Just follow Hank down that highway till you feel it when you say, I'm so lonesome I could cry. There's two Hank Williams references in this single broadcast for Casey Turner. This honky-tonkin' way of living, I've been living way too long. Excuse me if I'm late for heaven, I just lived a country song. And if I never get to heaven, well, I lived a country song.
If I never get to heaven, it's because I lived a country song. Ah, I love that line. That's
Hellbound.
yeah, one direct ticket. Whoop. Send me. That's Robbie Fulks, everybody. Thank you so much, Robbie, for being here. Thanks for making me and all of us smile during these times. Are you doing regular? I mean, I've seen you pop up here and there on this person's stream and this one. Do you have any regular schedule that you're pushing out to folks, or is it just kind of whenever you feel like it?
Yeah, I got a couple coming up. I got one on, let's see, today's Monday, and I've got one. Well, I'm recording one Wednesday. I'm not sure when it airs. I've got one Thursday that I think is a live stream. I'm working on a podcast with a friend, an improv comedy friend.
Oh my
It'll
God!
probably be up within the next 3 weeks or so.
Sign me up.
Oh, it'll be good, and it's on camera too, so it's audio visual, and it's going to be edited and kind of professionally done. And my friend's name is Jeff B. Davis. He's a great, funny guy that works on Whose Line Is It Anyway, and some other places. And yeah, other than that, it seems like I'm doing one or two of these a week. I got a Freight and Salvage coming up. I got one coming up from Fitzgerald's with my friend Tim O'Brien, and after that, yeah, who knows?
That's awesome. Well, just make sure if you're not already in tune, look up Robbie Folks Musician. I think that's the name of his Facebook page, and make sure you give it a like so you get a notification when he goes live next. Our next episode is this Thursday, May 7th, with Steve Poltz. Thank you guys so much for being here. And again, Robbie, thank you for all the great music and for the good conversation. Hopefully, folks learned a little bit of something about you today that maybe they didn't know prior.
Nano. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. You take care of yourself, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and it'll be up to Relive the Magic afterwards, and I'll upload it to YouTube as well for those folks that you want to share it with that aren't on Facebook. All right. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you.